Hello, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to welcome you to our May session of Connecting Knots. Thank you for making the time to come and join us for this session today, and also for our presenters. The focus of the day, or the session for today, is about the Trust values of honesty. With consideration of what this means to us, we're going to share individual thoughts about this, but to also support our common ambition to embed this value in our everyday work. Without further ado, I'm going to pass over and introduce a video from Paul Devlin, the Trust Chair. Thank you.
Hi everybody, Paul Devlin, Trust Chair here. Really sorry I can't be with you again for this Connecting Knots, so I thought I'd just put a bit of video in just to say hello, say a few things. First off, big thank you as ever to all that you continue to do for the Trust. I know that we are moving into what feels like hopefully post-pandemic times, which is great, and certainly I'm seeing there's lots of new exciting developments that are coming on stream now. So really feeling like we are absolutely getting beyond the pandemic and able to put energy into all of those other many things that I know so many of you have kept going over the last year and a bit. On the agenda today, I know that you're looking at, again, in terms of trust values, the honesty value, which is a really important one, I think. Also aspects of our culture, and importantly, particularly, I think, as we move out of this phase of the pandemic, infection prevention and control. And just to finish up, I'm certainly looking forward as part of this new phase to be getting back into being able to come out and visit services and actually come and connect with some of you. So I do look out for those opportunities. I know that we're trying to do some scheduling of my diary just so that I can come and connect a bit more. And finally, had a great morning this morning, being on the final judging panel for the shortlists and winners for this year's Oscars ceremony. It's one of those jobs which has been really tough, but a really enjoyable thing to do. Just spending the whole morning talking with colleagues, debating amongst so many fantastic examples of work. So have a great Connecting Knots, and I look forward to seeing you hopefully in person next time. Thanks very much. Bye for now.
Afternoon, everybody. John Brewin, Chief Executive. I keep having a conversation with Paul. I'm still disappointed there's not a category in the Oscars for Best Chief Executive, but I'll keep handing him the brown envelopes full of money. You're very welcome to an hour and a half of excellent inputs, and really looking forward to this afternoon's presentations conversation. As Paul's already highlighted, we've got some great content, particularly looking forward to the staff survey conversation. I want to say a little bit more about that, but also a bit of a conversation about where we are with regard to the pandemic, especially the peer support story from CAMS. And again, seeing our positive stars on the list of the great work that people are doing. So by way of update, just a few things to say to sort of kick us off and tune us in. I think we're now entering both organisationally, but also nationally, we'll see on the media, won't we, a sort of a new phase with regard to the pandemic. And on the one hand, there's the great story of the vaccination programme, the reducing rates of COVID and serious illness, and the excitement about the easing of lockdown. But that sort of step into the unknown. So what's next then? When can we go on holiday? Where can we go on holiday? What are the implications for not just our home lives, but our work lives too? What's the right balance from being able to work from home, come in to be with your teams and your colleagues at an appropriate time and place and remain connected? And also, what's what are the important lessons that we can learn about how to continue to support all our patients and service users across our diverse services? So, for example, myself and Julie Attfield were at the City Council Health Scrutiny Committee this morning, where they hold us to account with regard to our plans. And one of the questions was about what we learned from the pandemic with regard to how we can shape services to help enable access for all the people that need to use them, which sort of was a really good question, but goes right to the heart of some of our thinking, that what's worked well, what we need to keep. And Julie showed a really good couple of slides around the different uptake, for example, with video conferencing and telephone consultations, comparing young people with regard to adults. And clearly children and young people love the technology, and there'll be some groups of people that really prefer that, others that don't, and we need to work that through. There's also the really important aspect of making sure that we give staff space and time to recuperate. One of my concerns in the various chief exec and regional calls that I'm on, that very quickly that term recovery and recuperation has dropped down the list of priorities. And whilst it's right that we should be looking at getting elective care up and running, reducing waiting lists and making sure that primary care and social care are open, at the same time, I think more importantly is acknowledging the huge amount of effort that all our staff put into the last year, 15, 16 months of, keeping everything going whilst we've been in the heart of the pandemic. And that time was probably partly fueled by a load of adrenaline. It's quite exciting, being at crisis level. But once that adrenaline starts to drop off and we start to move into this next phase, that's when the potential for exhaustion and psychological worries start to impact. So we need to make sure that we're on the lookout for that. I'm really pleased around some of the developments that we've resourced around health and well-being of our staff, and people will also be aware that we hold the can, if you like, for the broader system health and well-being hub to support all the staff in across the patch in their mental health and well-being going forward. So that's a really good news story. We'll come on to the staff survey in a bit more detail. And I just wanted to flag I don't know if I mentioned this before, what a good result we had, but the executive team are acutely aware that this is a job that we started well, but there's an awful lot more to do to make sure that we continue with the improvements that we've made. And part of that is to make sure that we continue to have conversations with all our staff groups with some particular focus in particular areas that we know we need to do more on. So, for example, equality, diversity and inclusion, and the race inequalities that we know our staff continue to experience. So there'll be sharp focus on that, and that will be backed with, again, more focus on the You Said Together We Did brand, if you like, that we need to be better at showcasing some of the fabulous stuff that everybody's involved with. And I just wanted to finish by giving an example of that. So again, linking into Paul's comment about it's great to be able to start to get out again. I was let out of my office the other day to go to Attfield School, which is the largest secondary school in the country with over 2,000 pupils and 600 sixth formers, to join a visit that they hosted by Minister for Education, Vicky Ford, who was there to celebrate the success of our mental health support teams into schools. We've been a national trailblazer for this, And I was aware of it, but I'm not really aware of much of the detail or the scale of the operation. So over 40 members of staff, some brilliant leaders in our services doing some vitally important work in a new way. So these teams take a whole school approach, and as well as seeing pupils and their families for mental health support, they're also working with the school to, if you like, tool up the school to be able to have a much more effective mental health and wellbeing culture. And they're fantastic operations, and you'll be pleased to hear that they're on the agenda for one of the forthcoming Connecting Knots to showcase some of the great stuff that we're doing. That I think sometimes we're not great at waving flags about the great things, and this is part of the thing that Connecting Knots is all about, really. So I'll finish by saying thank you to everybody for what you're continuing to do. The organisation is in a good place. There's still lots of work that we need to focus on to get it to the next level, better place. But that's all from me to start us off by way of summary, and I'm going to hand it over now to Clare Teeney. Thank you very much.
Hi everybody, my name's Clare Teeney. I'm Executive Director of People and Culture. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. Just going to take the opportunity, if I can, to share with you where we are up to on the staff survey. So John referenced it there. We are now at the stage of communication and engagement, and also some doing. So the survey results. Survey was conducted at the end of last year, and we got the results and feedback in earlier this year. And during that time, we've been further analysing the information and the feedback from you. And some of the feedback applies to you at an individual level, within your team, within professional groups, within particular services and particular service locations across the organisation. And some things in terms of the feedback apply to everybody trust-wide. So just want to use this session at Connecting Knots to share with you some of the things that we are planning to do across the whole trust that apply to us as a whole organisation. So I'm just going to run through that in this session if I can. Next slide, please. So overall, and as John alluded to earlier, we had a really good response rate in this year's survey. So that was really encouraging. Our overall response rate was 55.6%, and that was up by over 10% from the previous years. And that had seen a real sea change for us. So we've been in a position where the staff survey response and feedback have been declining. So actually to be able to turn that around and encourage significantly more of you to complete the survey and give us your feedback has been really encouraging, and we're really keen to make sure that we do the work together with you to start to make a difference and bring about the changes that you have suggested in response to that feedback. Next slide, please. So just to recap, overall, there are a number of questions in the survey, but there are 10 key themes. And this slide illustrates that in 9 of those 10 areas, we showed a significant improvement. And the one area where we pretty much stayed the same was around safety and violence and aggression. In terms of the improvements that we made overall, as an organisation, it still puts us in a mainly an average position compared to our comparator benchmark organisations. But the improvement against ourselves in terms of our own performance in previous years was really, really significant in most of the areas. So much so that we were actually the most improved trust in our benchmark group for mental health and community services, nationally. And I don't know if you can see him on the screen, but the Chief Executive is cheering in the background. Because that's actually a reflection on everybody in the organisation. And what's really good about that is it's a brilliant reflection on the really hard work that everybody does every day. So it's rewarding for everybody in the organisation. So we're really encouraged by that, but we completely appreciate there's still a lot of work to do, and there always will be in an organisation of our size and scale, but we just need to keep moving in the right direction. Next slide, please. So just to take that down another level in terms of where we've improved and where we haven't. You'll see on the slide, it shows our 2019 scores compared to our 2020 scores. And in the areas where we'd improved, you'll see that the percentage is quite significantly higher. So, you know, it ranges from 11 up to 14%, which is really significant in terms of that move in the right direction. And particularly, what's particularly important is the increase of 14% of people saying overall that they would recommend the organisation as a place to work, and that is a key indicator as to how staff feel about the trust and what we refer to as staff engagement. So how engaged are the people that work with us in the organisation? So it's really encouraging to see the feedback around that particular question. On the least improved from the last survey, whilst in terms of the difference where we've improved the least is a kind of a marginal percentage, where we started on those scores was not necessarily the best place. So this is some of the areas that we absolutely need to work on. And we've done some further work in trying to understand that particular feedback. So next slide, please. So one of the domains, as I said earlier, where we haven't seen the overall improvement was in relation to the safety domain, and within that it covers areas such as people experiencing violence and aggression at work, bullying and harassment, and those sorts of experience, which are not obviously what we would want for any of our colleagues. But when we analysed that question area more specifically and the questions that sit under that domain within the staff survey, we've analysed it in a number of ways. So we've analysed that question by sort of service area, by professional group. We've also analysed it by equality and diversity characteristics. And from an ethnicity perspective, what we can see is that significantly the experience of our BME members of staff in that particular area is significantly worse than our non-BME colleagues, particularly around a few things. So in terms of career progression and how our BME colleagues believe that there's inequity in career progression, how BME colleagues feel that they are not supported at work by their line manager, and the experience of bullying, harassment and violence from patients, service users and carers. What our colleagues are saying is that their experience is much worse than non-BME colleagues within our service areas. And I think that you only have to look at that slide to just see how stark that is. So that is an absolute priority for us, and next week myself and Alex and other colleagues will be meeting with the BME staff network to go through this in more detail. And I know that Robert Mookham, who's the co-chair of the BME staff network, has done some further work on this so that we can start to co-produce what some of the other actions will sit around that in response to that. And we will make sure that we continue to make this visible through connecting knots and make sure that we feed this back. As John said, as part of the, you said together we did, this is a really important area of focus for us. Next slide, please. So another factor when we analyse the feedback, so in an earlier slide it talked about most improved areas and least improved areas. One of the least improved areas was around some of the physical environments that people work in at work, people's experience of musculoskeletal injuries and illness. And when we've looked at the questions that relate to that in more detail, and again, we've analysed it by equality and diversity characteristics in terms of the survey, what it shows is that people with disabilities and or long-term conditions, again, have a worse experience of working with us. And it particularly references about colleagues with MSK issues, people experiencing work-related stress, and people feeling that they are having to come to work when they don't feel well enough to do so, where they are experiencing a disability and or a long-term condition. And again, it's quite stark when you look at the information in that way. I think what's really encouraging is that we did have the feedback from colleagues that told us this. So the responses to the staff survey from our BME colleagues and people with disabilities and long-term conditions was their response rate was also improved this year. So actually the responses are proportionate, and it does enable us to get a real feel for where we need to take some action, bring about some improvements to really make a difference for everybody across the organisation. So it's not necessarily good to see or hear, but it's really important that we know it. And we're absolutely grateful that people have fed back and have been able to be really honest in the survey, and we would want to continue to encourage people to do that. Next slide, please. So based on this information, we have done a series of engagement events across the organisation, and we did have a trust-wide event in April earlier this year to discuss this feedback and information. And the slide there just helps illustrate where people said that they felt that we needed to focus. And I think what's really important is that whilst I've focused on the last two slides about the areas where we've had feedback which shows that we need to improve, we also need to make sure that we continue to build on the really positive bits of feedback from colleagues as well, not to lose sight of where we've made good improvements and need to continue to capitalise and expand on some of those. Next slide, please. So with all that in mind, what we have concluded is the 3 trust-wide priorities. So this is not to say that other information will not be, other feedback will not be acted upon, and we won't be doing lots and lots of other things. But in terms of where I opened the presentation, I said that things can impact on people at an individual level, within teams, services, professions, and across the whole organisation. And we believe, and having engaged and got the feedback from a number of colleagues, that these are the 3 trust priorities where we absolutely need to focus our attention to really make a difference across the whole trust going forward next year. So it will be about improving the experience of our BME colleagues and reducing discrimination and bullying. Focusing on health and wellbeing and raising awareness of specific issues faced by disabled colleagues and those with long-term conditions, and reducing violence and aggression experienced by all our colleagues across the organisation. So those will be our trust-wide kind of focus areas, and what we will continue to do is update you on the actions that we will be taking as part of a trust-wide You Said Together We Did programme. I'll pause there if I can and hand back over to John, just in case there are any final comments.
Thank you, Claire. So no, that was a really good summary. So just a couple of things for me. First of all, people might be sitting here now or listening to the recording thinking it was all very well, but you know, it's only a survey. Why is it so important? Here's my view. I've said this before, but I think it's, well, it does pertain, and it is an important aspect. This is This is something that's been in train for a number of years now across the NHS, and it has an awful lot of academic heft behind it, if you like. So it's more than just a survey, it's a window into all organisations, worlds, their culture and their environment that staff work in. And it's therefore a really rich seam of feedback about how the organisation is doing, because it's first-hand reporting from, you know, in our case, potentially over 9,000 people. And organisations that do well for their populations, their patients and service users, do well on the staff survey. So it's valid and it's a critical tool that I think in the past we've not made the most of, and we're starting to do that. The second thing, people might be sitting there thinking, well, that's all very well, you know, we're most improved, but we're still fairly average. And you know what, my team's not very good, and this might all be good words, but what's it going to do for me? My response to that would be to get involved. We're a huge, diverse organisation, and some of these summary points are, you know, really impressive. But we know that there are teams that, for whatever reason, feeling isolated, not connected in, and get involved and send me an email, join in, because everyone can be a part of this, and it's part of our sort of global endeavour, if you like, in terms of, you know, what's the task for leaders and senior managers. It isn't just that. Everybody in every part of the organisation's got a contribution to make, and part of the environment that we like to create is everybody feels valued and able to make that contribution. So there are just a couple of more sort of additional sort of thoughts on Claire's more sort of concrete presentation to get people thinking. And I've been instructed, just make sure that I follow up my instruction, to let us know what you think in the chat, in the Q&A. It's really important. This is a live and iterative piece of work. Let us know today. Put some questions in. Does it feel right? Does it sound right? Give us some commentary. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Alex Lyon next. Thank you. Alex, over to you.
Thank you ever so much, John. Thank you. I'm here and very much linked to what John was just saying, actually, about getting involved and really being part of the organisation at many different levels. I'm just here to talk to you about the champions and the culture of the champions across the organisation, and how very much what we're looking to do is expand the role of the champions across the organisation and really showcase some of the fantastic work that our champions across in many different forms are doing. And again, linked to what John was saying about how we've gone out and we've talked about our values and our behaviours across the organisation, really linking in our champions across the organisation to those values. As you can see on the slide, got a range of champions and champion networks and champion specific programs, really looking at different topics across the organisation. So we've got freedom to speak up champions, green champions, equality and diversity champions, staff health and wellbeing, digital. We've got those looking at the mental health first aid, and we've got a whole range of link professionals that work into our amazing clinical areas as well, and really looking at really improving some of those and sharing the knowledge across in many different ways across the organisation. And we've also got hate crime champions across the organisation. Please, a plea, if there is any other networks that I haven't mentioned, and please let me know, and we can make sure that that we're showcasing that work as well. That's great. Thank you. Next slide. Thank you. what we're doing, what we've done as an organisation, as a group of people who are really looking at the work of the champions across the whole organisation. All of the leads have worked together to look at the overall aims of being a champion and how we can really link that into the cultural change that we're looking for across the organisation, linked very much to our values and our behaviours. And what we've outlined is what you can see on the screen, really, is just having a definition, an overall definition of what it means to be a champion across the organisation, how we look at about, you know, supporting colleagues to keep abreast of key information and support others in their work, share learning and ultimately change the culture of the organisation from so many angles. So when we're looking at, for example, health and wellbeing champions, we're really looking at colleagues who are able to share knowledge about what's available for colleagues across the organisation. We're linked into staff health and wellbeing, but also very much looking at what we're doing with regards to the work on values that we're looking at, and teamwork and all of the different things that we're looking at, making sure that colleagues are feeling confident to appropriately challenge and showcase and ask questions of our champions across the organisation. So it's quite an exciting time, really, to really start to link up some of the expertise across the organisation. And just for information, just currently, when we got together as leads of networks across the organisation, we realised that we've got over 1,500 champions across the organisation, which represents around 17% of our workforce, which is absolutely phenomenal, and really showing the passion and enthusiasm of people who want to go for, you know, higher and above and feel that belonging within to the organisation, and also the particular topic that they're passionate about. What I would encourage you to do, please, and next slide, thank you, is to have a look at the other areas, have a look at what champions there are, have a look at what you've got within your areas, and to see if there's any particular networks that are missing that you're unaware of, and that we really want to encourage everybody to have at least one champion within their team, and just have a look at what's available. There's new pages on Connect showcasing the work, who to get in contact with for not only to become a champion, but also where to seek the support if you're needing that across the organisation. So, as I say, that's absolutely, you know, really encourage you, and massive shout out and thanks to all of the champions that we've got across the organisation. They're doing a phenomenal job of really going above and beyond their day-to-day work. So that's absolutely fantastic. Thank you ever so much. And I'm going to hand over to Karen Ceesay, who's going to talk to us about her experiences through COVID. Thank you ever so much. Thanks.
Hello everybody. Hi everybody. Thank you firstly for the opportunity for allowing me to present today. Over the next 10 minutes, I wanted just to give you my perspective through my lens around the experiences of going through COVID Wave 2. So we'll take you through some achievements and some reflections from my point of view. Okay, so I'll just show my slides. I'm hoping everybody can see that. Okay, so the first thing that I wanted to do is just set a little bit of context in terms of where my role was and what role I played in incident management and COVID Wave 2. So initially in September, Wave 1 had ended, and Wave 2 we knew was on the horizon, and we knew that as a trust we needed to strengthen some of our incident management control functions and processes. So the what in terms of what I was expected to do in September, I was asked to support the establishment and leadership of a strengthened incident control function. As I said, the learning from Wave 1 had highlighted an opportunity to improve some of our command and control structures. We'd identified ways of supporting clearer decision making, accountability and greater control and oversight. We did that by a revised incident management governance framework and structure, which was reporting through to the incident control team. Now, what that actually gave us was a single version of the truth, a single route into and out of the organisation, very important whilst we're in command and control and we're working through the complexities of regional and national requirements, and it improved the line of sight of everything I've mentioned to date. So the next couple of slides is what I want to do is just point out a couple of key achievements in terms of what came out of Wave 2. My reflections as I go through is Wave 2 was very different in terms of Wave 1. It was complex. It built on Wave 1 in terms of urgency and the nature in the fact that everything was evolving, but it introduced a number of different elements. Outbreak management was one of those. So in Wave 1, outbreak management in its current form didn't exist. Now, what I'm not celebrating here is the fact that we've had outbreaks, but what I am celebrating at this point is how we actually managed and responded as part of that incident control structure. So just a couple of points to note. We've had a total of 59 outbreaks declared across the organisation. The first of those outbreaks being on the 19th of September on Amber Ward. The last outbreak was the 29th of March. It is important to note that at the time of this presentation of Connecting Knots today, we haven't actually got any active outbreaks across the organisation, which is a fantastic position to be in. The reason that I wanted to celebrate what we achieved as part of Wave 2 is on the 18th, 19th of September, when we declared an outbreak, we didn't really fully understand what that meant from a system, process and response perspective. We had to spend time, but in a very short space of time, declaring and defining what an outbreak was, when an outbreak was declared, when we could close it, and the impact on the wards. In terms of that, we had to define our own systems, processes and practices around that, and we had to do that very quickly with the spotlight on us from external parties who were part of those outbreak meetings. Another thing that we did as part of that is we needed to set up our testing support in terms of PCR testing through lab capacity, and we worked very closely with our colleagues at Sherwood Forest Hospitals to make that happen, as well as actually setting up some additional swabbing resource via our existing staff testing team. What I've put on the screen there in terms of why it worked well is it was clinically led, but with incident control team support, allowing the clinicians and the experts to put the expertise into the process whilst we've got support from the incident control team. There was an element of learning and best practice, and that was a core component of every meeting. Now, what I'll also reflect on is the same learning and best practice we spoke about on our first outbreak. There was still learning and best practice to be defined at our last one, because this is evolving and we looked at every learning opportunity. The other key achievement, I think, around outbreak management is that we've set up a really strong, robust infrastructure, and this has allowed us to respond to any evolving national and regional requirements, whether that be tomorrow, next week or the week after. Okay, my next key achievement that I wanted to celebrate was around staff vaccinations, and just a couple of things to note before we go on to some of the facts and figures. My belief is that Notts healthcare is quite complex in terms of its geography, not only within the Notts system but further afield. We also had, in the initial stages, a reliance on accessing vaccinations via different hospital hubs and local vaccination sites, not being able to give them ourselves. Some key achievements in this: our first vaccination date within the Nottinghamshire system was the 8th of December, and within 10 days Nottinghamshire Healthcare had access to some of those slots, again via our system partners Sherwood Forest at Kingsmore Hospital. Also a note to everybody, apologies for some of those late night phone calls or evenings, weekends and Christmas bank holidays where there were slots available and there was calls out just to go and fill some of those appointments. Some of the key achievements then just to date is so far 8,365 members of our workforce have been vaccinated, and this equates to 83%. Of those vaccinated to date, 82 have received both doses. And one of the facts that I find quite interesting is around the fact that we've attended as a workforce over 220 different vaccination sites across the country. The figures that I've given you there really also shows that we're benchmarking in line with our acute colleagues in terms of overall uptake, which again I think is remarkable given the fact that we didn't have access to our own vaccine in the early days, and we also started a few weeks later. So there's still work to do. Vaccinations are still available, so if anybody does still want to take up the offer of a vaccine, and I'd encourage you all to do so, the staff testing team can help signpost into some of those appointment slots. So another key achievement I wanted to mention was around incident management. So when I went into this space in September, one of the first things we started to do was establish the right team. We set up the right incident response around task, and we set up an operating framework, which is a posh way, I suppose, in some ways of just saying a set of tools or a set of different things to do. Since that date, we've actually agreed a number of decisions and derogations, and a breakdown of where we are in terms of our current status is shown on the screen. It's interesting in terms of that because what we could actually do is very easily track through decisions, any risks, any improvements using that incident control team. These aren't new concepts, but I think what worked well in this sense is that we tailored them around the organisational need. So we brought together the right toolkit, the right team, the right people. It focused on the needs of the clinical services, and our incident control team meetings was very much around how can corporate services and others help clinical services to provide the service which they did. We also had a direct link into daily communications and also staff line manager communications, and we set up the flexible infrastructure to meet the changing needs. So the next slide is the one that I could probably spend a lot of time talking about because this is the learning and personal reflection. And what I've put on there are a couple of my personal reflections about why it worked. Overall, it created a supportive environment, and I feel it was heavily focused around our trust values. People took ownership of the actions, solutions were co-produced in a safe and yet structured environment, and challenges were recognised and shared. However, due to some of the evolving nature of Wave 2, some of the unknowns, some of the complexities, some of the urgency around regional, national and local demands, I think it's also important to acknowledge that we didn't always get it right first time because we sometimes couldn't see around the corner around what we needed to do. But the important thing to note is that we were operating in I've put on there no blame environment, whereby we had permission to make the best decision at the best time for the best reasons, and if we needed then to amend, change, flex, change direction in the future, then it was all for the right reasons. So the final slide that I just wanted to come on to is building on the slide that I've just been speaking around my personal reflections, and this is around next steps. So my plea from today and from the work that I've done so far is that we don't lose our strengthened operating practices, and actually some of the learning and some of the best practice that we've taken from Wave 2 we use as a platform for continued growth and development. As a project programme manager by background, I also acknowledge that actually this stage is often the hardest element to actually come out of. It's sometimes much easier going into a programme of work rather than coming out of it for the reasons that I'll just go through very quickly. The first one is around the balance between incident management and business as usual. There's competing priorities, different approaches. We have to flex on a daily basis between reaction and planning, and that is getting harder by the day as the expectations rise across the system and within the organisation. The second element really is around transitioning of Wave 2 activities into a business as usual environment. So my plea again there is the fact that we're coming out of Wave 2 with many things that we didn't go into Wave 2 with, and that includes things like vaccinations and lateral flow. Always remember to record your lateral flow. So you know, some of the activities that we need to do at that point is we need to look at where it ends, look at where the new beginning is, and look at where it sits in terms of new responsibilities and business as usual. The other element that I just want to end on in terms of my true reflection of my time in incident control is around celebrating the success. We responded to the business need, we responded to an unknown wave 2 business need. The pace and the urgency and the complexity of some of these pieces of work is like nothing that a lot of us have experienced and hopefully won't again. But we did it. We celebrate, we know we did well in many areas, and rather than looking at where it didn't go so well, I think it's an opportunity to look at every challenge as a learning opportunity and look at where we can start to build those learning opportunities into continuing the way we operate. So I leave today with a thank you to everybody I've worked with across Wave 2. It's been a pleasure. I hope it has for many of you. Thank you to everybody out there for their continued support in terms of accessing things like lateral flow, staff testing and vaccinations. And thank you. I'll hand over to Anne-Maria.
Thank you, Karen. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Anne-Maria Newham. I'm the Executive Director of Nursing AHPs and Quality. So my subject today is my favourite subject of all time, IPC, Infection Prevention and Control. You'd never thought that I'd have that, would you? So one of the other important things is to say to you that I am also the Director of Infection Prevention and Control, the DIPSI. When I told the doctors that, I went to a doctors forum for the trust, they thought that was hilarious. And they thought it was Teletubbies. They thought I was one of the Teletubbies. So I'm not one of the Teletubbies. I need to tell you this is a very, very serious subject matter. So the importance of infection prevention and control. I don't want all of you lot to think that now that COVID's gone, we don't have to think about it. All right, we have to think about it more than ever because it's not going away, and infection prevention and control is a really important subject for all of us. So even when COVID goes, we'll still have flu. We'll still have our MRSAs, our C. difficiles. We'll have lots and lots of other lovely infections. So this is why it's really important for you to really engage in this subject and really start to see the importance of it. So the back to basics, I've written there on that first slide, back to basics and not letting our guard down. That means, yeah, I can see that people are starting to already relax a little bit. Oh, we don't have to do the cleaning as much. We don't have to do the touch point cleaning as much. Well, we do. We really do, because actually that's going to prevent other infections as well, not just COVID. I want to mention BBE, bare below the elbows. Oh, I've seen some really lovely examples of what people wear below their elbows. I think there was a bit of a myth that this doesn't apply to certain areas in the trust. It applies to all areas that see patients, and this is particularly for forensics, mental health and community health. So all of the staff that have anything to do with patients, bare below the elbows is hugely important. We've invested in being able to have watches that pin to your top so you don't have to wear a watch on your wrist. But remember, you're not meant to be wearing any big jewellery, bracelets, big rings. So please, this is really important for us to adhere to. And we do see some terrible practices with regards to bare below the elbows. And that is also one of the reasons we thought about, you know, uniforms to help you with this, so that people didn't still wear long gowns and long clothing over their arms. So the other thing is that I just wanted to say is that matrons and ward leaders, you are all role models. You're all unbelievably fabulous role models, but we're still seeing some jewellery, we still see false nails, and we still see flip-flops. So especially with the summer coming, I don't want to see the flip-flops again. I've seen them a couple of times. So this is just a big reminder. This is not acceptable in a healthcare setting, okay? And some of you might not want to think that you're in a healthcare setting, but we are. We honestly are. So please remember the jewellery, the false nails, the nail varnish, the flip-flops, what you put on your feet. Please take into account that it's not acceptable. We have a policy for uniform and how people should be wearing things. And I want to add to that one as well, is if you're in a clinical area with patients, you should not have long hair onto your shoulders. You should have your hair up as well. And face masks. Oh, I love a good face mask. Now, I've actually brought a face mask for all of you to have a look at today. So can I come back onto myself a minute? Can you put the red line around me a moment? Is that all right, Alex or Jordan? Way, right, so this is your face mask, and I want you to treat it with care and dignity and love. So what I want you to do is when you put it on, okay, remember to put it over the whole of your nose and the whole of your mouth. It's not to go under your nose, it's not to go under your mouth, and it's certainly not to go on top of your head, all right? So I see it being worn in lots and lots of ways. It's not an item of clothing, it's not an accessory. It is a PPE, a personal protective equipment. So I just wanted to say to you, please, please respect your mask. Don't touch the front of it. So if I'm wearing it here like this, please don't be pulling it down, pulling it up. Oh, and the biggest thing that everybody does is whilst they're wearing it is sitting like this in meetings, all right? Don't be sitting like that in meetings. So this is just, please, honestly, I hate saying to people when I'm in a meeting, please wear your mask correctly. So the last one I want to just say to you there is hand hygiene at the right moments. Hand hygiene is really important. It's in your personal life as well as work life. So if I can go on to the next slide, please, Alex or Oliver. So the 5 moments of hand hygiene, we'll see them next. Yeah, so those moments of hand hygiene are really there to help you understand what we need to do to prevent infection spreading. So before touching the patient, before any clean or aseptic procedure, after body fluid exposure or risk, after touching a patient, and after touching patient surroundings. Those are the 5 moments. Good practice, best practice, please, please adhere to, and we will be in a great position if you do that. Next slide, please. So I've found this slide and I love it. You know that slide where you see that cough and it goes for, honestly, meters and meters and meters, doesn't it? I wanted to try and represent that. I know I've not represented it that well here, but you get the idea. So wearing a mask does prevent you receiving all of that droplets into your face and into your mouth and into your nose. But I just wanted to remind you all that if you are going to sneeze or if you're going to cough, please, please, please remember it's okay to do that into your elbow. All right, that's the best practice. Put it into your elbow, and because I've seen so many people sneeze into their hands and then go to shake their hands with somebody. That we don't want that. We don't want that because we will just go back up again with our infection rates. So I just wanted to show you that because I thought that was a great slide. Next one, please. So to dip or not to dip, I thought we'd have to have some fun here. So in the olden days, when I was on the wards a lot, we used to do dip urine all the time. Do you remember that? We always dipped the urine, and we also used to dip the urine on every admission as well. Well, a few years back, quite a few years back, in fact, that stopped. OK, so we do not now need to dip. And I'll come to the next slide, please. So everyone loves a dipstick, and I did. I used to love them. It was one of my favourite things to do in the sluice. I like it. But anyway, it feels like a useful test. That's what you feel. You feel like you're doing something good because you can see the test, you see what the number is, and you put it in the record. But it means very little, and it might even be harmful. So it's really difficult to ignore a positive result, and it gives you confirmation bias. Now, what I'm saying to you is this: is unless the patient has got symptoms. That's the only time we need to start thinking about doing a dipstick. If the patient is asymptomatic, we do not do dipsticks anymore, okay? So we can reduce the use. So some of our wards in this trust are still doing a urine dipstick on admission. We don't need to be doing that. So next slide, please. I want to give a big shout out actually as well to Rachel Medcalf. So Rachel Medcalf is currently the interim antimicrobial steward. And she's brilliant at really helping people to understand the use of antimicrobials and the fact that we shouldn't be using all the antibiotics and antivirals that we are using. Next slide, please. And so I just wanted to say that Rachel's doing a great job across the trust to ensure that everybody understands what good practices around prescribing, because we tend to get into the we tend to get into wanting to prescribe lots of antimicrobials, which we do not need to be doing. And certainly some of this lends itself to that as well. Are we struggling to move on? I can end it there.
I think that's your last one, Anne-Maria.
Well, I think the last slide was just a banner to re-emphasise this around urine. So not to worry, that's absolutely fine. So thank you very much for everybody listening, and please, please, please respect your mask and do your 5 hand hygiene points of contact. Thank you. Oh, I'm handing over now to Julie. I need to remember my lines. Sorry.
Thanks, Anne-Maria. You've got us all dreaming about wearing flip-flops now. It could be some time looking out the window. Right. So we're moving on now to this month's good news story. I have to say we're having quite a challenging time in our CAMS services at the moment. So it is actually particularly nice to introduce a CAMS good news story. So I'd like to introduce a video of Saffron Bradshaw, who's a peer support worker, and about the impact that she's having in our CAMS service. And the video features Saffron and her manager Joanne Lake. So with no further ado, we'll move on to the video. Thank you.
Hey Saffron, good to see you this morning. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm really good. Hey, I had a lovely call last week telling me about the positive star that you've been awarded from the Trust. And I was thinking this is from a nomination that I know our clinical lead, Sarah Bonney, nominated you for, and fully agree as a team that we were so pleased to nominate you. And it's really lovely to have someone in our team receive a positive star. Could you tell me a little bit more about it? What do you know? What have you heard?
Well, obviously, when I got the email to say I got the Positive Star Award, it means so much. I think to be acknowledged. You don't expect it, I think, but yeah. you don't do it for that. But I think in our team we really celebrate positives. Obviously, we talk about it every single week, and we try and bring positives into our days and cheer each other on and stuff. So I think to be able to get that, and the words that Sarah wrote was so lovely. I did print it out and I was going to frame it, but I didn't in the end. But no, it was really nice. And I think, you know, going back to the period of time she was talking about, obviously summer last year, we're just coming out of lockdown. And I was asked to get involved in Carers Week, which is something that is really close to my heart, I think, especially at that time, because you know, going through lockdown as parents has been really difficult. It's been really hard, especially for the parents that are in our service.
I think it had been a long time of homeschooling and lots of restrictions, and children and families and parents just finding lots of different difficulties. And I think as a service, we were really mindful of that and wanted to do our best to support families. And
absolutely,
and I think, you know, your role's been so important in that, not just in the pandemic, but throughout since you joined us.
Yeah, I think it's lovely, my role, because I get to be flexible and I get to be creative and I get to do all the fun stuff, which I know like is really hard for you guys because you're so busy doing the clinical work. So it just feels like a dream to be able to do stuff like that, because you know, because obviously a lot of the time we're so busy and we haven't got the time to do the extras. So so I think we tried to focus on sort of well-being for parents, but I think parents can get so bombarded with emails and letters and stuff. I wanted to try and do something a little bit different, I suppose. And I know how much it means to people when they get something special and they know they've been thought about. So yeah, and also it had been a long time since I'd been out and about. I've been stuck at home working from home, so I just wanted to get out and, you know, and just get out and about and see people. And obviously I just dropped at doorsteps and stuff. So yeah.
So you created these lovely goodie bags. So what were they like? I remember seeing them, but if you tell me, remind me how you created them.
Oh, well, I just got some really nice colourful little bags, printed loads of positive quotes off, because I love a positive quote. So I thought, you know, it'd be nice to have that, read that, and you put them on the fridge or keep them in the purse, you know, just to know that, you know, we've been thinking about them, we know it's hard, and they're in our thoughts, kind of thing. Some chocolates, a herbal tea for them to take a break, and then printed off the parent sort of well-being booklet that we'd put together, which is based on sort of the 5 principles of well-being, but really breaking it down and trying to make it like more aimed at the times that we're in at the, you know, at that moment, thinking about COVID and thinking about the things, the difficulties that we experienced in that time that we'd never gone through before, like the not having the connections with our family and friends and colleagues, and bearing that in mind. So yeah,
like that really fits with the sort of trust values. I was thinking about this the other day, and it's sort of that honesty in terms of honesty about our emotions, honesty about the challenges, but really being honest that you set that up yourself. You went out and did that off your sort of own volition, you know, you chose to do that. And the compassion that brings to families, to know that, you know, we really do want to give compassionate care, and like you say, just having that time to say, try and keep positive, take a break, well, you know, look after your well-being as best you can. I think that really supports that. It's so inspiring, and I think from that there was other things, hasn't there, going forward? There's been things that you've organised, the catch-ups with parents, the cuppers, the virtual cuppers.
Yeah, I mean, we had some, I mean, off the back of that, the clinicians that sort of asked for me to go and drop a goodie bag off at their parents' house, we did have some really nice emails come through, and it just showed that, like, it did actually mean a lot to them. So it sort of pushed me to keep going with the parent carer stuff. So we did eventually set up the Care for a Cuppa, which is just a monthly informal peer support group, I suppose, but for parents. And so that's been going virtually on a monthly basis since, and it was it first started in the third lockdown in January. So I remember just knowing that I had it in my diary and thinking, oh, you know, I really wanted to make it really special, and I wanted to, you know, put some activities on and cram it with stuff, but I just didn't have the energy, and I didn't, because, you know, that time was really hard, obviously. So I kind of took that to the group and I said, look, this is hard, I'm really struggling, like the kids are at home and I feel everything's so busy and it's really dark and horrible and cold. And that was like the starting point, really, of everyone going, oh my God, I feel exactly the same. And I realised that we didn't really need anything else. It was just that space to be able to be honest and share our experience. And it's just gone from there, really. So we just do it monthly. We have some members that have been coming regularly, or some people just drop in every now and, you know, dropped in every now and then. So
it's so well valued, and I think as a team we really appreciate that, and the families I know do. So it's been so lovely, and I'd just like to reiterate, so well deserved. I'm so pleased you've got the Positive Star Award, Saffron. Absolutely fantastic. And thanks for having a chat with me today.
Well, that's
really
okay.
Great. Yeah, and I'll see you really soon. Thank you.
Soon.
Wow, it has to make you smile, that, doesn't it? Because you'd rather like to be, I know you don't want to be needing to be on the receiving end of our services, but if you really did, then you'd really want that sort of approach. And I think that was really lovely and amazing, actually. And so much of that conversation is relatable. The way that Saffron describes people's feelings, and also the way that she's responded, absolutely over and above what we would have wanted. So it's just brilliant, a real example of going the extra mile. So you know, I'd like to thank and acknowledge the work of Saffron and Joanna. It's really helpful as well, because it pitches where we need to be at in terms of delivering the long-term plan. Peer support and carer support is so much part of the new model. So I think that really sets a benchmark, working in such a personalised way and adjusting the way that care's been approached during times that have been so difficult, really. So I think the care and thought that's been afforded, I just think is brilliant, and I think Joanna's words are right. It is really truly inspiring. So we'd like to thank colleagues and well, thank Joanna and Saffron for working in this way, and also for sharing the story. It's really great work, and I think we'll be sharing that good news story a bit further, far and wide. So thank you, and it's an inspiration for us all to see that. So I'll move on to the next part of the programme, which is our question and answer session. We've had a few questions, and I'm going to just read them out and bring in my colleagues. And I think John Brewin's tipped his thumb up to answer the first question, or at least to kick us off. So the first question is about, John, what do you feel the key leadership areas of focus need to be for our leaders and managers throughout the trust in the next few months? What are our key leadership priorities and areas of focus?
Yeah, thanks, Julie. Echo your comments about that last video. It's fantastic to see. So that's a really good question, and I've got a couple of takes on it. One is the sort of personal qualities that I think are important for leaders, and then one the next bit is about and something specific for the time that we're entering into now. So leadership is on the one hand quite a complex art. There's lots of stuff written about it, but in my sort of simple mind, I boil it down to a few things that I think are important. The most important, I think, about a quality in a leader is knowing yourself and being self-aware, and to use a phrase you just used, actually, Julie, to know what it's like to be on the receiving end of you. So whether it's you've been on the phone answering a concern on a reception, whether you're in a team, whether you're on a ward with a patient talking to a carer, when that's finished, to find time and space to think about, I wonder what it was like to be on the receiving end of me. And people that can do that often can really develop their leadership skills. Related is, I think, a visibility. So I don't think you can be a leader behind a desk, and that's really challenged a lot of us, hasn't it, over the last year? Because guess what, a lot of us have been stuck behind desks, and I'm particularly really frustrated that they don't unlock the door until about 5:30 and let me out, and then I just get in the car and go home. So the visibility, being with people, talking with people, and one of the key aspects of that, I think, that sometimes gets a bit lost, is the ability to listen. It isn't always about the leader has to go in and talk and have grand visions and strategies and the answer to everything. I think more important aspect of good leaders is being able to listen and develop the conversations to enable people to feel able to have a conversation about the things that are important to them. They'll all have ideas about how to do things better, what's going right, what's going wrong, how can we improve stuff. So there's some of the important bits. The last bit, I think, touches on the theme for today, is about honesty. So for me, good leaders don't have to have the answer to every question. I think it's okay to say, I don't know that, it's a good question, I'll find out for you. But also to be able to own up when things haven't gone well and saying, didn't work, these are the reasons, let's put something in place to make sure that we can address that and get it right next time, so that you don't have to be superhuman and have your sort of underpants on the outside and wear a cape. So there's a couple of sort of reflections on leadership. I think for now, over the next few months, I think I'd add in something around the flexibility to adapt and to be agile. I think we're entering a sort of an unknown phase of finishing this wave of the pandemic, going back to some sort of business as usual, but we're going to need to be agile to meet what I think will be quite a rapidly changing environment. So I think that's the sort of flavour that's going to be helpful in the next few months. Hope that's helpful sort of kick off around that one, Julie. Thank you.
Hi, I think Cameron's come to me just to add in a couple of points on that if I can. So I think just thinking about the feedback that we had from everyone last year in terms of the staff survey and that real focus on health and well-being, and I'd say in terms of leaders' priorities, please focus on that for yourselves and also your colleagues, really, really important. And that you continue to role model the trust values. I think the other thing that I would say is that there's leaders and there's demonstrating leadership, and people, everyone working in the organisation can demonstrate leadership. I think that's really something that we shouldn't lose sight of. And one of the things for me, and something that I think we do need to explore, again linked to some of that staff survey result, is that if you see or experience colleagues that are on the end of bad behaviour, and it might not be happening to you, but please be an ally to people, step in where you can, support your colleagues, make sure that they're okay. And actually that for me is something that everyone can do, and if you can't do it, we need to have some conversations about how we help everyone to be able to do that across the organisation. I would think that they are a couple of priorities for me related to leadership for everyone. Thanks.
Thank you, Claire. John, others were going to contribute, but we think you've done it beautifully, so we'll move on to the next couple of questions. Claire, these are going to bounce back to you, I think. The first one, there's a question about are there any plans to improve health and well-being for people with long-term conditions, and that's staff actually.
So yeah, so as we kind of alluded to in some of that staff survey feedback, that is a real factor for us, and I think it's something that as we've had more of a light shone on actually during the pandemic, because in terms of colleagues that have had to shield for various reasons and work differently, I think what it's enabled us to do as an organisation is understand some of the different experiences for people and be able to put in processes to support. One of the things that we really need to make sure that we do is continue to enable people to work flexibly where they can. I think that's really important, and also to raise awareness. So for some people, they don't want to talk about long-term conditions or disabilities, quite rightly, and they are largely hidden to other people. But it's about people just being able to notice and be able to create the space where people can have conversations so that can explain how they're feeling and we can make the right adjustments. I think that's something in terms of our behaviours that we're going to do. And finally, we are expanding the support for the health and wellbeing team. It was set up last April. I think it's going from strength to strength under Tracy Orlando's leadership. So we're going to continue to do that. And we are developing and strengthening our own internal occupational health service provision. And I think that's going to stand us in good stead. Hope that helps. Thanks, Julie.
Thanks, Claire. Spot on, I think. So there was another question, Claire, about the staff survey and the comment that it's good to be showing the progress. But there was a specific question asking about whether the violence, the level, well, the issues we've got about the levels of violence, if they're staff on staff or patients or relatives on staff. Just a bit of a differentiation and a subtle difference, a question about that.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. So in the main, in terms of the areas of concern, it was really about violence being experienced from patients and all their carers, friends and family members of the public. But in terms of some of the experiences around bullying and harassment, that was from both patients and families and members of the public, but also there was an element of staff bullying and harassing other staff in there as well. So slight subtle difference between the violence question and the safety question around violence, and the bullying and harassment one sadly being applicable across the board.
Thanks, Claire. Thanks for answering that question. I'm going to hand over to John in a minute and John's video. So, but John, there was a comment or a question on the Q&A about the ministerial visit. And I know that it left you sort of buzzing earlier on in the week, so I don't know if you want to say anything more about that, but otherwise I'll hand you over to start your session on the trust values and focus on honesty. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Julie. I suppose the thing about the ministerial visit is you're never quite sure how they're going to go, and there's a lot of preparation required because they're rightly important events. And whilst I was driving up the whatever road it is to Attfield, listening to Jeremy Vine on BBC Radio 2 getting aerated about stuff, I was thinking, okay, hope this is going to be all right. I've got my briefing pack, I know where I'm going. Needless to say, drive past the school, miss it and have to turn around, but I'm still on time. Irrespective of your political views, the minister was really impressive in that she was really well briefed, and she was really brilliant with the young children and their families who attended specifically to have a conversation with her. And I sensed that she was really sort of embedded in this endeavour and really supportive of what we were trying to do, and she was keen to know how to make it better. The other side of it is that, as ever, I'd needed to worry about our fantastic staff being absolutely brilliant. So there were a number of people from the mental health schools support team there, and they held quite a detailed conversation and put on the spot by the minister. She was asking questions. I was thinking, well, that's a good question, not going to be sure how we're going to answer that. So as I said at the start, they were so impressive and inspirational. I volunteered them to come to one of these at a future event, but for the record, Sarah Kinsey, Becky Barney and Laurie Potter, a big shout out to them for a job exceedingly well done. So we're on to take a pause, new sentence, the trust values, honesty. I've not got a lot to say about this specifically. We've touched on it already. It's a really important value. We've got a video here that I'm really looking forward to seeing, because if I'm honest, I haven't seen it yet, but I know it's going to have fantastic content in. So press the button, please.
Hi, my name is Jaleesa Carr and I am a assistant psychologist for Forensic Camps. Honesty for me is about openness, being real, genuine and authentic. So this is in relation to who you are and what you stand for. But I believe that it takes a lot of courage to be honest about these things. But through doing it, it will open the door for better standards, better relationships and better experiences.
My name is Simbi Sbanda and I'm the Freedom to Speak Up Guardian. I'm here to talk about what honesty means to me. Honesty is a word I grew up hearing and also practicing. I was brought up in a Christian home where honesty, respect, and all similar virtues were firmly established. At the time, I associated honesty with not telling lies. However, as I got older, I think honesty means a bit more than just not telling lies. To me, I think honesty is about being truthful to yourself and others. Being honest with others will earn their respect, but being honest with yourself will encourage self-respect. I also think honesty can be about allowing ourselves to be vulnerable. I believe it takes true humility to accept things that we don't know, or we don't always get it right, as our CEO once honestly said. So, as I finish, I believe that honesty can help us to learn and improve. I actually like the words by Mary Kay, who said, honesty is the cornerstone of all success, without which confidence and ability to perform shall cease to exist. Thank you.
I do want to say a few things then, a couple of things, as I've got a few spare minutes apparently. I was looking forward to the Gillingham Player of the Year Awards 2021 as the next video coming up, but we'll have to live without that. Well, I said it'd be a good video, and what Simbi said, particularly at the end, really strikes a chord, doesn't it? And I think my reflection on this is that, on the one hand, it's a really easy thing to say, isn't it? Well, let's be honest. Let's have an open conversation. And one of the things that I josh with my colleagues about sometimes is, particularly when we're in some of the system meetings, almost always on Teams, and there's a conversation going on, and it's almost a habit that people get into. After somebody said something, somebody will then come in after they put their hand up and say, I completely agree with everything John Brewin's just said. However, and then there's a long list of all the things that they disagree with. And I think sometimes we get into the habit of not being dishonest, but sometimes having truly open and honest conversations can be very challenging, and you have to be quite brave to do it. And but when you can get into the discipline of reflecting and doing it properly with respect to other colleagues and people that are around, it really does pay dividends. And for me, it's something about making sure that we help provide people with the skills and confidence to help develop that specific value and the behaviour that's related to it. So there's a couple of thoughts from me on that. And Julie, I'll hand back to you. Thank you.
So, as has become tradition, it's a pleasure to share with you this month's list of great colleagues who've been nominated for Positive Stars, and also details of this month's winner. 48 nominations for individuals and 10 for teams. Absolutely fabulous. And there's the whole host of names of individuals and teams. Thank you, colleagues, for nominating and acknowledging the work of your other colleagues. It's truly really nice to see this celebrated in this way, and congratulations to the complex health team who've won this month's award. So thank you. I'd like to now obviously bring the session to a close. I'd like to thank you all for your continued work to support our patients, their families, the local community, and of course each other. I hope that you're all able to enjoy what new freedoms we've got or getting, particularly next week. Don't spend too much time in the pub. Please make sure you can carry on coming to work through next week. That was a joke. Of course, I know that you're all not going to be doing that. But I hope you do take some time to relax and connect with friends and family. I know that these have been the things that we've probably missed the most. But also just to end by saying a huge thank you, and we look forward to seeing you at the next session on the 17th of June. So thank you.